Hello, I'm Jonathan Weiner.
I'm Enrique Gonzalez Müller.
And welcome to episode 3 of Are You Listening? The Mixing Series.
We're going to dive into setup, balance, and repairs. Before we jump into the fun, we want to make sure everything is ready so we can just drive.
Please join us for this episode. Subscribe to the iZotope channel so you can be notified about new episodes of Are You Listening? Or anything from the minds of iZotope.
We're going to start with the scenario of somebody sent us a multi-track that was maybe done in a DAW that you don't use. So you just got a blob of tracks, and we're going to take this from A to Z. People that maybe work on their own, and they don't start this way. Still, I invite you all to take these concepts and try them out. Again, never am I saying this is the word, this is the way, but it's really trying to explore all of the topics that I can think of to get you ready to have fun later on. So here we're starting out with this blob of tracks. This song is called Amnesia Invocada by a Venezuelan band called Vinilo Versus, aka Vinilo Versus. Boom, we have this multi-track. It looks like a big blob. The first thing we're going to do is look into track order, removing any dead air so that we can see the arrangement a little bit better. And then finally, we're going to do some color coding. So first on the track order, if we go see here top to bottom, it seems like we have drums, kick in, snare top, and it seems like there is some rhyme or reason to what we got delivered, but I want people to think about it this way. When I mix, I think of building a house from the foundation, most important, all the way to the accessories at the top. So for me, this is a rock track. If we listen very quickly to the chorus, you'll get the vibe. Rock. So, drums are important. Drums are at the top. Then what's the next instrument that's important to lock in with that foundation? The bass. Then the guitars, then the vocals. Here some people might say, but wait! The vocals are the most important thing for some genres. Maybe start there. This is why I do it this way. I keep instruments as one family and vocals as another family. But still, the thought process behind this is the most important at the top. So if I start with the drums, the kick, being arguably the most important thing, is at the top, followed by the snare. If I move forward to the next family, which is the bass, you see here that this first bass track right here happens not throughout the whole track. So to me, this would come after this other bass that is foundational throughout the whole thing. If I follow that same logic, here we go to the guitars. These guitars here are really the ones that are occupying most of the airtime. So I'm going to shift those first. And then the other only thing that looks like it could be better is when I get to the vocals, the lead vocals are more important than the backgrounds. So now that this is in place, what I now do is I mute everything and I start unmuting top to bottom to start building my house. If that makes sense, let's move then over to removing dead air. What I mean by dead air is you see here, for example, nothing is happening there. So this, even though it's silence, the computer is still playing this back and it's bogging down the CPU. I want to keep things light for the computer. I also want to be able to see the arrangement easier. So for me, I just go and put on your favorite movie, your favorite series. You don't have to be listening to this stuff, and you could do it. Having said this, you do, if you have a cymbal fade or you have a breath, you want to be very attentive to those, but this is the gesture. Perhaps at this very hit of the drums, if we listen, rock, here I might solo the drums and really make sure that that last hit is not being choked by my fade, right? And there I would make my chop. So in a moment, because this is a cooking show, we're going to open up the final version, but I would go on every single track and do these edits. So now we have the track order. Now we have the gesture of removing this dead air. The next thing that I do is color coding. Here we have the drums, and I am just going to help me visually navigate this stuff. So here, these two basses are the same sound. This other bass is still in the bass family. Perhaps for guitars, I jump into another, and I go through the whole multi-track this way. There are no formulas for this stuff. It's the concept again, the concept of looking at this and being very efficient with navigating. So there, this is how it looks. And if you go back to where we were to this, just navigating this is so much easier. So our next step is, now that we're all color coded, is to make groups that we can solo and mute together. The next thing is going to be to set up our auxes. So if any sounds need to be combined, as well as setting up our effect auxes, we're going to do in a second, and then we're going to import reference mixes. So the first thing in groups, these super awesomely color-coded tracks, we will make a new group and call them, you would never guess,
Dumps.
Exactly. This bass is a pair. So these two tracks make up one sound, and I'm going to group this as bass and JV, who's the name of this bass player. This is a standalone. That's a standalone. Then we have this guitar rhythm and so on and so forth, right? So I go and make groups out of everything that together makes up one sound. Pausing here, let's go over to creating auxes. So auxes for me are open signal vessels that I can sum sounds together. So for these two bass tracks, I'm going to want to EQ them with one processor, most probably. These two guitar tracks are a doubled performance. So what I will do is go and create a new track. And this on different DAWs looks different, but the concept is the same. So this is going to be bass JV aux track, and it's stereo. And so I'm going to put it below so to keep everything the same. And you see here that now this bass comes out of one aux. So this I go and would do for these guitars, for these second guitars, etc., etc. So here I will set up just a couple of effects templates right away. So right here at the bottom, I am going to create 2 stereo aux tracks. Boom. And we'll label them as, let's say, delay. And the next one we're going to call reverb. I will solo save them right away. And then the inputs for these are going to be, whoa, look at them. Delay, quarter note, and reverb 1, for example, in here.
I got to call out solo safe while you're doing that, just so people understand that when you solo the dry instrument, if it's going to the effect stays live. You can still hear it.
Final step is the reference mixes. I have up here already imported a few reference mixes. So here you see that I have 4. All of them are reference mixes. Some of them are more closely related to the genre. So with that ready to go, and let me see here, I also have on Ozone, I have loaded up my reference mix. I can check this off the list and move on to the next tier of things. Balancing and panning. The key is keeping it instinctual. It's about just how it feels. So the first thing we're going to do is listen to the dense-est part of the song, which is going to be the chorus, and take an assessment of, this needs to rock. Is it rocking? No. How come? And we're going to answer that question with our suggestions. So let's go to the chorus, maybe 4 bars before the chorus for a little bit of context. So here is Amnesia Invocada by Vinilo Versus.
Yo sigo abajo.
So I listened to this because I know the song a little bit. It's not quite rocking. Why is it not quite rocking? Well, if I listen to the call and response of the kick and snare, which is a lot of where the energy is coming from, I hear the thump of the kick drum, but the response of the snare is not quite there. How about if I go to the other instruments? How about the overall aggressiveness and brightness of the drums? It's there, but I think that it could be almost a little more open-mouthed aggressive, so I think that's going to come from the overheads. Just moving forward a little bit quicker, the bass I also think is a little bit low. Why? Not a lot of support. There's a lot of harshness, but not a lot of support. And the guitars, which is a lot where that kind of white noise almost wash along with the overheads, is not quite supporting the aggressiveness that I need. So with that in mind, I'm just going to make some quick moves over here. So here we're going to start with the snare. And this is all obviously to taste, right? So we're going to play. I'm going to loop this and just bring the snare up until it feels like it rocks. Overheads. Great. For the bass. A little bit more support down there. And I think that now, at least that the rhythm section feels a little bit more energetic. Then going to the guitars, bring them up a little bit. Let's check this out. A little bit more. Lastly, the vocals. So remember I was saying about mix organization, instruments and vocals. To me, it's you're having a conversation with the singer and the band is how tough around the singer is the band.
Support.
So for me, the vocals are a little too loud. Or you can also say the instruments are too quiet. They're kind of timid and shy. So I'm going to bring these down a hair. A little bit. Panning. Where is the width really going to come from? The first thing typically to tackle is the hi-hat, right? Where is a drummer's perspective? You always want an air drum. Come on.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. A lot of other people.
You want an air drum. You know you want an air drum.
Left-handed.
So here, I'm going to put this to the left because I want an air drum. If I go and play the overheads, right, as they are panned hard left and right on the verse where there's more hi-hat, the hi-hat is actually leaning to the right. Yeah, so there's either some mislabeling or something's going on. It doesn't matter. It's opposite of what I want. So here, I'm going to take care of that. If I listen to the rooms, so now this is leaning to the left. If I listen to the rooms, it's kind of one blob of top end, so it doesn't really matter. That's totally fine where it is. If I go down the list, the bass is going to be in the center. Then we have these guitars that happen during the verse, which is the same as the chorus guitar. These are meant to be enveloping and huge. They're going to be wide left and right. But then there's this verse guitar. And it's kind of a tense part of the track before it pops open to the chorus. So if I have the hi-hat on the left, I'm going to pan this a little bit opposite to create a little bit of tension. So I'm going to grab. And due to the focus of the whole thing on the right, it's seeming to be a little bit louder, so I'm going to bring it down a hair. And that feels good to me. So this is, again, my super, very instinctual balancing and spatial distribution, aka panning. Now, to put our money where our mouth is at, remember how when we were doing the reference mixes, I had made a bounce of the before and imported it? I did the same here. So let's go listen to the before and after and just do a toggle between these two.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada. Esto es amnesia invocada. Esto es amnesia invocada. Entra por el piso.
The before.
Esta vez yo no me voy a ahogar. Esta vez tú no vas a ganar. Suba la marea y yo sigo abajo. Yo sigo abajo. No vas a ganar.
On this listen really quickly, instinctually, that verse guitar is a little bit loud, but I want to keep it instinctual. So this to me is more musical. It just, everything pops a little bit harder. Just that coarse distribution is better for me. I'm totally set to go.
You're disciplining yourself not to get overly analytical too quickly.
And it's an exercise. It's a really hard one. Just, guys, time yourselves. Just, this is going to be the balancing 15-minute mix. And when you're done, go have a coffee or tea or water, and then come back, coffee, and then come back and listen to it and keep it instinctual. You're not going to overthink it, but just those big building blocks need to be in place. So now that we've done this, we're going to get to something where I'm going to kind of turn over the mic to you a little bit, which is going to be gain staging, meaning I'm free, I'm an artist, I'm pushing faders, and I have no regard for how these signals are summing onto the master fader. People always ask about how loud should a mix be when given to mastering, right? Which is then the objective for us mix engineers onto where do we put stuff.
If you're exceeding 0, while you're in the box, it might not be an issue, but the minute you go to print or going out a D to A converter, it does become an issue. So you might as well bring your overall level down and make sure that's not happening.
Yeah.
There's a whole Are You Listening episode about limiting and loudness and all of that. And if you are pushing level just to push level when you're mixing, stop. Like, don't do that, because you can do that later. But if there's something about pushing level that's really, truly contributing to the overall sound that you want, great.
I'm going to tell you how I do it, not claiming that this is the correct way, but I'm going to tell you the reasons why. One of them is I want to be nice to the mastering engineer. So that's one. Then the other one is how I approach this is informed by many, many, many years of teaching mixing at Berkeley, where I see where the common shortcomings are in mixes, and this seems to help out a lot. I don't want to hand something to the mastering engineer that is clipping above distortion because unprofessional, not right, you're distorting. How loud then should it be? At this stage, there's no processing, there's no EQ, there's no anything. But I have something that feels groovy, that feels musical. So anticipating that I'm going to be adding a bunch of EQ, a bunch of compression, doubling things, parallel compressing, yada yada, I need to build myself a good hefty bit of headroom. And that typically for me, magic number that has worked for me is about having my peaks be at -12. If we go to the chorus again, and let's loop the chorus here. We have a groovy mix, right? And let's see if we look at this master fader, which yes, has ozone, but it has nothing in there. Let's look at where it's peaking. So peaking at around -6. We have 6 dB of headroom to grow into. In my experience, it's too little. Quickly, I start distorting. So this to me is the time to be a little bit conservative, to be a little bit safer. So I have here a group that has all of my multi-track and I just bring it down until it conforms to that -12. So if I have to bring it down -6, I'm just going to grab any fader because they're all grouped together, bring it down about -6, and that gets us right there. Surprise! It's a little quieter. But check this out. And I turn up the monitoring a little bit, and there we go.
Right.
So now I'm just ensuring that I have plenty of room to mix into, which is eventually going to not have me backtrack and have to correct a bunch of issues, and it's looking out to be nice too. Here, I have one session called Phase and Latency. This is something that I am looking to see if there are any issues with the recording itself. Maybe something's out of phase. Maybe something is flamming a little bit, and I just take care of it now. Disclaimer. Sometimes you get a mixing gig and you have to turn it over in 5 hours. Will you have the time to do the things that we're going to start talking about now? Sometimes the answer is no. But if you do have the time, this is something that I find yields a lot of positive impact. So here, if we go look at any tracks that together make up one sound, or rather tracks that captured one performance, like the bass with the bass and the DI, or the drums with a bunch of microphones recording one instrument. Here, if we look at the bass, we see that the bass has a DI track and it has an amp. The DI is a little bit earlier. It might have been that the microphone is a little bit further apart. Who knows? We're just getting these tracks. If we play these together, sure, it sounds like a bass. But if we zoom in, we can already see visually that the phase relationship is not quite there. Besides the delay, right? So we can see the delay, and we also see that the phase relationship is not quite there. So if we can just flip the phase really quickly with like relay, just go flip the phase. Let's go listen to how this sounds. And it balloons out a little bit more. The thing that I want to do is actually fix the bigger issue, which is these are not coinciding. So even though it might be very fast, right? If we go measure this here, let's be on samples. So this is seems to be about 410 or 400 and some samples away, one from the other. That to me is the issue. So the first thing that I would do is go and fix the latency. That's the concept, right? So here, I'm going to bypass this flipping of the phase that we did. And now let's go listen to these two. So here we go. And you hear how the bottom end is a little bit more robust. And if we had any flamming little issues, those are also taken care of. Let's just expand this to the drums a little bit. So I have the drums as we received them. And then I made another playlist with all of the fixes. So if we go listen to these drums here in the verse, for example, these sound, I guess, okay. Sound like drums. Kind of wide, a little splatty, but they sound like drums. If we go take a closer look, we see that we have here dry, right, near kick drum, and we have dry near snare microphones. If we use these dry microphones as anchors for the bleed of them on the other tracks, right? Because on the overheads, you're going to hear the bleed of the kick. You're going to hear the bleed of the toms. Let's see how we're doing on timing. So here, this is right where the snares start, right there. And if we go over, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. If we go to the overheads, we see here in the overheads, which are these 2 tracks, that they start a little bit later. And we actually see that between these 2 tracks, they're not coinciding either. And then, of course, if these are late, these rooms right at the bottom are even later. This is, of course, natural and to be expected because the room microphones are further away.
Right.
The thing that we, as being paranoid engineers that we are, which, serves us right sometimes, is that we might start to hear flamming. And that might get in the way of punch, if punch is important. So before we look at the latency of all of these tracks, let's actually focus on the overheads. The same way that we had this bass not quite lining up at the same time, and when we did, the low end got a little bit better. Here the issue is that we know it's a stereo track. We want the hi-hat to be on one side, the ride to be on the other, perhaps, but the snare should be typically in the center. That phantom image only happens if the signal from the snare got to both microphones at the same time. We're looking at it, and that doesn't quite seem to be the case, which might explain before why things were a little bit off and maybe opposite. Maybe not quite opposite,
right?
But still, we might need to look into that. So here, the same thing. I take a measurement, and that measurement is done in samples. I write what that measurement is here, which is about 90 samples, and then I go and shift, and let's see. So listen to the imaging of the snare in the before and after. So here we go. And you can see the snare go right to the center. This is an issue that if I don't fix it here, here's my cake, here's my snare, here my overheads. Following this train of thought, the same thing goes for everything else, right? I just take measurements. Is there any latency from the toms? Is there any latency on the overheads and the rooms? What's my anchor? The dry kick and the dry snare. Here, this is the before, this is the after. And you see how the tracks are shifting. You also notice that these tom tracks gray out. And that's because there's a lot of low-end bleed that I don't need. I only unmute them when the toms are actually playing. So with this, let's go take a listen to the before and after so you can hear the low-end definition, how the stereo field is organizing itself after this. Here we go.
Feels tighter.
Totally does.
Yep.
So the low end is also a little bit better. Everything is a little bit tighter.
It's amazing to me that our brains can actually resolve timing differences that are this little. First of all, it's like our brains are amazing.
Yeah.
They're amazing. And we can leverage that by doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the issue is, how important is it to do this? And at what point would you say to yourself, maybe it's not only not important, but maybe I'm better off letting it be?
As I was saying a minute ago, you have 5 hours to make this thing. You don't have the time to do this stuff. But what I want to do for all of us is just raise awareness and give you as many tools as possible. And this to me is a big one. If you don't have the time to do it or you weren't paid enough, maybe you would let it slide. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I do observe with this is now I have more control. And now I'm aware of what issues are so that when I go, why don't I have low end? Why is my snare all splatty and not focused? I know why. Maybe for the vibe, having it be splatty and having the stereo imaging of the drums be a little bit wacky might be more conducive to the objective. But do that with the awareness that that's what you want to do. Now that this is done, I start thinking, how much energy do I have to spend into a mix. And I also start thinking, I have these visions of what I want to achieve. Will the proverbial rubber band of the sound stretch as much as I need it to reach my objective? When I listen to these drums, there's a great of the overheads that I love, but if I go and listen to the snare or the kick, if we go listen on their own, not super flattering, also very, very, very dynamic, all over the place. Snare, kind of same deal. Not a lot of life here. It's quite dynamic. So I'm already starting to think, will the rubber band that I've been giving stretch to what I need? My answer is no. So rather than me trying to squeeze water out of a rock, drum fill, drum samples. And this to me is the moment for drum samples. So here in this cooking show, let's zoom all the way out. And here I have prepared for us this wonderful dish of many kicks and snare samples. So let me activate them for you. I am going to play us the chorus before and after. Then I'm going to zoom in and explain a little bit about thought process about kicks and samples and how I layer them. But just think of your intended audience, right? Which is, they don't know nothing about samples. Which one rocks harder? Forget about engineering. Just think about your intended audience. Play version A, play version B with samples. Tell me which one rocks harder. Difficult question, right? I know, think about it. So, of course, right? This is something that I get out of the way and do it here quickly. So just taking the opportunity very quickly to tell you how I think about samples is I think of samples typically in one of two ways. Either I am looking to compensate for a shortcoming. So if I hear this kick drum, it's not a lot of low end. It's very dynamic. So I found one with a lot of low end, and obviously because it's a sample, it's not dynamic at all. Then I continue complementing until I build the sound that I want. And different characteristics that then I tailor a little bit with a little bit of EQ. This one could use even more low end, and that's how I tailor the sounds. Here, you see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million snare samples. Why, Enrique? That's what my mom would say. Why, Enrique? Why do you do this? Because, one, I might need different sounds that together make up one giant sound that I can't quite get out of one sample. And then another reason is because, as you can see here, I love to play with turning on and off different samples in different sections so that I can create storytelling with different envelopes, with different frequency footprints, etc., etc. So to this point, let's go listen to the verse and then listen to the chorus and see how these change. So just these two samples. And here the kick drums are always the same. So now you're used to this verse aesthetic for the drums. And now it's a little bit more aggressive, it's a little bit longer, and this is made up of these sounds if we isolate them. So here is the first one. Super distorted, trashy. Punchy and thin. It's almost like a little crunch only. That one has a note. And that's how I build my sounds. But at this stage is when I get rid of all of this needed drum samples. If invited to, if given carte blanche to mix engineer, creatively do your thing to make us sound better, I take a pass at how things are lining up in rhythm. If we listen to these vocals, listen to the pocket of the vocals within the groove of the drums.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso. Hey,
Here.
yo no recuerdo nada.
On those subdivision, ta 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 ta.
Esto es amnesia invocada. Esto es amnesia invocada.
What I hear is that the singer is on top of the beat. He's rushing. And that creates a lot of, it creates energy, right? So there's ta-ta-ta-ta on top of the drums.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada.
But what's the emotional objective of the verse, according to me, is he's saying, hey, yo no recuerdo nada. Hey, I don't remember anything. This is like provoked amnesia. This person is totally out of wits. They don't know where they are. So for me, it's this molassier, whoa. And then we have the chorus, which is energetic. So the energy is kind of misplaced. So what I would do is create another playlist and play with rhythmic shifting. And here, because this is a cooking show, I moved it by about that much, which is 2,069 samples. I do it by hand until I see how it feels. So let me play you the before, and actually let's loop this phrase here. And when I loop again, I'm going to switch over to the one that's a little bit later and see how the energy feels.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso. Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso.
Let's listen to it one more time. But to me, it almost feels like ta 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 ta, and the other one, it's like he's almost feeling it in halftime.
Yeah.
And it's so kind of lackadaisical and lackluster, and I love that. And it's just me going, moving it a little bit. Before.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso. Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso.
It could be a psychoacoustic thing because I like you and you've told me that you've done this because you like it better, but I like it better. I mean, it sounds like you haven't changed the level. The vocal's clearer. The lines that are being sung are a little bit clear of the whack. The
Totally.
thwack. So,
and this very concept that you're pointing out is when you go listen to a snare and a tambourine, you might have the tambourine be a little bit on front, be right on the money, and none of those are the better one. The better one is in accordance to what are you trying to do? Oh, I recorded the tambourine because I want the snare to feel brighter. Well, they could be totally in line. I want it to feel a little bit looser. You get it. So to me, though, this is part of next level mixing because it not only impacts how it feels, but then your EQing is going to differ because of this stuff. Next would be the topic of amplitude editing. So here again, I have 20 minutes to mix the sting. You might not have the time to do this, but if you do have the time, I'm anticipating compression. I'm anticipating how much volume writing am I going to have to do, these type of things, right? So maybe you have a singer that goes da 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 da, and when they go to the lower note, they don't push as hard. Sure, you could do it with a compressor, but thinking ahead, your compressor is going to be happier having uniform input going into it so that it can effectively change the envelope of the sound like you want it rather than be chasing something that is all over the place. So with this in mind, I've taken this a little bit to the extreme, but just to exemplify, and done some amplitude editing to the syllable. So let's listen to the before, and then let's listen to the after, not looking for automation, not looking to make things louder or quieter, but rather to fix recording issues. So with this in mind, let's go listen to the before and then the after.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso.
And you hear that there are lower notes that are not quite coming through, etc., etc. So here I do a pass of amplitude editing. And here, if we go take a look, you see that I've chopped and brought this up by 2.6, this one by 3.5, this one by 2.4. Yes, this does take time.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I'm also thinking about how much time is it going to take me to do a compressor that helps me with this stuff? How much time is it going to take me to do that finer tuning of an automation pass? It's going to come out in the wash somehow. To me, this is fixing an issue that is important.
But this is arguably better. I mean, you said earlier, make the compressor happy.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is the compressor doesn't have to try to resolve these problems.
Yeah.
Like you said before, you can use it to shape the sound without trying to overdo the control of these sort of micro events.
Yeah. And to me, it's we have to fix a million things, which is the most effective way to fix something. Do you want to change the envelope, or do you want to make things more dynamically uniform? With this, let's listen to the first pass without, and then let's go listen to the second pass with. So here's the before.
Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso. Hey, yo no recuerdo nada, solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso.
And if we focus in on, thank you. Let's just focus in on those because it's a lot of work. Let's go listen to it again. Here's the before.
Solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso. Solo recuerdo tu mirada, solo recuerdo mi quijada por el piso.
And like you were saying, it's not only is it a lot of work, it takes a lot of mental focus to sort of keep perspective and do this work, which I'm sure is why you're saying, do this stuff early, get it out of the way, so then you're not having to suddenly take a moment and say, I can't hear the T at the end of the word T.
Exactly. This is also, as I was saying before, I want to raise awareness. I want to raise awareness of tools that are, yes, are going to help you in mixing. You know, pro mixers maybe have somebody that they go, hey, assistant, please go do this work for me. Somebody who maybe doesn't have the time does look at the whole song and go, wow, the pre-chorus is considerably louder. Maybe it was punched in. Let me help that. This is going to help with your production work as well.
Mm-hmm.
So just something to keep in mind. We're almost there. Sibilance. Do I take care of sibilance here? Egregious, really problematic sibilance at this stage? Yes. Because again, I just want to eventually grab an EQ and get to work. Here's an example of sibilance that is kind of sucking my will to live. Listen to the background vocals. Esta vez. What I hear are two switchblade knives that go like, esta vez. Like, scary. Those S's are super mega potent. One more time. This is an issue at this stage because if I go grab an EQ and I go make things brighter, those S's are going to kill me. Mm-hmm. And I think about it this way. Imagine dynamics in this axis where this is really loud, this is really quiet. To me, the tone of the vocals are here and the S's are way out here. Mm-hmm. So what I want to do is affect the tone. What I'm going to do now is just do this so I can fix that issue. So I have a couple of instances of nectar. And yes, I have some pitching that is happening, but then I'm going to turn on a couple of de-essers. Just to run you really quickly on how I assess this is I open up my instance of Nectar. I'm going to pan this to the center. And here I'm going to turn this off. You're going to hear the pitch is quite hard. We're going to talk about tuning in a second, but I can't undo it. So here is, again, with no de-essing. Turn this on. So if I listen only, I'm really looking to just nip those S's, right? So typically above 3K. If I go hard, right? So about only what I need. That sounds like a good setting. I will option copy that to the bottom. Cool. Now I have my 2. Here it is with out. And then when it loops, I'm going to pop it back in so that we can hear the de-esser. So those S's are still there, but they don't cut our ears. And one thing that I'm also thinking is that these are doubles. I mean, they're happening at the same time, saying the same words as the lead. So the sibilance on the lead is going to carry the S's that I need, and I can afford to go really hard. Very last thing is tuning. And here, when I say tuning again, we're in this kind of fix-it mode, right? So it's just any big tuning issues I resolve right away. So it's just a little gesture. Here, I'm putting in Nectar again. Correction, yes, I'm going pretty hard, but I just want to knock things into place so that I can just stand back and listen to my mix and have things kind of be in place, and then I'll fine-tune. So here, let's listen to the same instance again, and I will pop in these 3 so that you can hear them once with no tuning, next time with tuning. Here we go. And that, to wrap things up, is the gesture. Is it the reason why I got into mixing all of this stuff? Not really. But without this, it's like, I want to go on a great trip to the outdoors. You need to take a moment to pack the bag, to put gas on the tank, to make sure that your battery on your cell phone is fully charged so that then you can go have fun. This is the same thing. So to me, it's super mega important. And hopefully these tips and to the depths that we've covered them are useful to people out there.
Well, you've talked about a lot of potential things that one can do. It doesn't mean you have to do every one of them every time.
Yeah.
But now you know you have the tools in your toolkit and how you can use them.
Yeah.
Right. And so if the technology is there, it's kind of amazing what we can do to make things better.
In some way, it's maddening how much we can do. And we should ask ourselves, how much should we do, which is like 3 episodes worth of stuff, to get into. But at least for me, because I'm the mix engineer that has to go and deliver something that nobody cares what the technology is at the end of the day, all of the things that I have done do help my cause, which is to have the intended audience who knows nothing about any of these plugins hit play and go, this rocks.